Good to hear that.
Yeah, Chuck, please sit down.
Here.
Sit down. Well, fantastic. Well, lovely way to end the first day. You mentioned the issue of media versus creative, and I suppose that's quite a key question. It's occurred in one of the panels earlier on today, and it's been mentioned by many people in this room. I just wondered what our delegates thought to that. Can we have a question, please? Have you all got your keypads? Just wonder whether media agencies are actually set up to become strategic brand leaders. What does our delegation to Venice think for that? I think I preferred the first question this morning, actually, to that one. There's another question, maybe just slightly nuanced. I don't know whether this might help us. The next question, please. So moving on from broad brand strategy, but let's talk about the creative idea, the big idea. Are our media agencies, do they threaten advertising agencies as the suppliers of this elusive creative idea? What do you think? Ladies and gentlemen, Sir John Hegarty.
Into the lion's den, isn't it, really? I'm surprised, actually, on the first question, with so many media people in the room, that you weren't more certain. So that's given me a lot of encouragement that you're not sure about what you're doing. But don't worry, you have two creative people here to help sort it out for you. But let's face it, we do know what we're doing. I'm going to... fantastic, Chuck. I haven't seen some of that to work, and it really is brilliant. I'm going to talk a little bit about subverting the new media landscape. And I'm going to start with a little quiz for you, and I'd like you to consider these 8 images. The first one, of course, I'm sure you'll know, Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel, then the Mona Lisa, one of Picasso's Cubist pieces, Frank Lloyd Wright's Falling Water House, Jackson Pollock, circa about 1950, I think that was, Kerouac's On the Road, Easy Rider, and, of course, what else could I end with but really Hill Street Blues. So, the big question is, what does link all of those together? Undoubtedly, brilliant, memorable pieces of creativity. And of course, they absolutely have one other thing in common. They changed the way we thought about their particular medium, from painting to architecture to books, films, and TV. Understanding the medium you're expressing yourself in and the relationship the consumer has with that medium is fundamentally important for the creative process to succeed. In whatever we're trying to do, in whatever we're trying to create, it's fundamentally important for the creator to not only be aware of, but to understand how people engage with whatever it is they're looking at or they're experiencing. Why? Because ultimately, the creative process is trying to subvert your relationship with a medium and present a more memorable, profound thought or experience. From the Sistine Chapel to Hill Street Blues, the creators of those works were trying to find a different way of putting forward ideas. Different because they wanted to make a difference and obviously an impact. To do that, they needed to disrupt and challenge the conventional process by which we consumed ideas. And that is exactly the task we're charged with on a daily basis. To gain attention and establish one brand's preference from another, and hopefully its superiority. When creating a poster, a TV commercial, a cinema spot, a magazine or a newspaper ad, I have and intimate knowledge of the way people consume those different media, how they interact with them, what stops them, what involves them. The particular media also, of course, has a history, a relationship with the viewer, its consumer, that I can further utilize to help me disrupt that process. But what if the media has no history? What if there's very little understanding of how people are interacting with this new space? That in fact, the media is changing so fast, it's hard to keep up with the relationships it's developing. And of course, alongside all of that, it's also difficult to assess how it relates to the broader media landscape. And of course, one could say, what is the broader media landscape anymore? If one looks at the history of cinema, we find the medium firstly being used to amaze people. And apparently, the first cinema goers were stunned to see in an enclosed room a film of a steaming train rushing into a railway station. It was said that when this was first shown, people ran from the theatre in absolute fear. They were so stunned by the reality of the experience. Gradually, of course, people tired of seeing just the outside world projected onto a screen. So someone had the brilliant, bright idea of perhaps filming theatre plays. And after a period of time, people grew rather tired of that. And then someone invented the close-up shot and revolutionized the way cinema could tell stories and how we interacted with that particular medium. The big question for all the new channels of communication is, do we really, as yet, understand how people are consuming them? And are we really creating in those mediums brand-building work? We may have a lot of information, but how much understanding we have, which is far more important than just pure information. And this, for me, then, is the big question, the elephant in the room. And before anyone says, of course I understand it completely, I would challenge them and say that's nonsense. An intimate knowledge and sophisticated understanding of how people interact with any given media is an essential ingredient in utilizing that communication tool. On the face of it, the famous Economist campaign from the UK that appears almost exclusively on 48-sheet posters must be one of the worst media decisions ever taken. Here we have a business magazine with a UK weekly circulation of about 160,000, utilizing the most public broadcast media one could possibly imagine. Yet we all know it to be hugely successful. Of course, part of the campaign's success is that it states its brand position so publicly. It doesn't mind that 99% of the people who see those ads will never buy the magazine. Posters give the campaign and the product status. They add value to that magazine. So understanding the media and the public's relationship with it is therefore a fundamental part of the media decision-making process and the creative process. And I would argue intimately linked. So, we're faced with a dilemma. Do we just ignore the new media opportunities until we can really measure their value, or do we engage with them and help possibly shape their future? We must never forget, of course, that we are empowered to spend our clients' money in the most effective, cost-efficient way possible. Naturally, that's why I'm here, I suppose, I believe in the latter, in engaging with this new media. But before you can engage with this phenomena, you have to have some philosophical approach to how you use it. You don't just start doing stuff. Doing stuff isn't necessarily engaging with people, it's just, well, stuff. When a writer sits down to write a book, they have a point of view of what kind of book they want to write. Likewise, a filmmaker will approach the craft of filmmaking with a philosophical point of view. And so, therefore, should the digital creator, especially as they are creating in a developing medium. But what's the medium's value? How can I utilize it for my client's best interest? How do I believe it's used? What kind of work do I want to create? And what kind of work do I think will provide effective communications for my clients and their products? It's at this point that one should perhaps recognize the fact that it's not really a medium. It's a multitude of mediums. And much of it is owned by the people who occupy it. It's not theirs, it's not ours. It's theirs, not ours. We really are occupying their space. So we have to consider the value we're bringing to them. So I'd like to give you my 8 lessons of engagement in the new media environment. You might have seen on the program it was 10. In fact, this is such a fast-moving industry that it's now 8. So I shall give you those 8. So my first one is respect the user. And I think, as Chuck said, motor advertising is what I call command down. It talks at its consumers in a non-conversational format. It may adopt a conversational tone, but essentially it's a one-way conversation. In this new world, you have to learn how to let go. And just like a conversation, you don't ultimately know where you're going to end up. So you have to listen. And of course, it's amazing what you can learn. The best form of advertising, as we all know, is someone passing on your point of view. Interacting with your consumers helps engender a greater understanding of the value they put on your marketing. And remember, in this new world, trust is a fundamental part of the exchange. Lose that trust, and you'll find it incredibly difficult to get it back. Lesson 2 for me is be irreverent. Too many brand owners think the world revolves around their product. Of course, we all know it doesn't. But this belief becomes a major impediment to genuinely creative thinking, especially, I believe, when it's interactive. And it's here that a powerful measure of irreverence is called for. Why irreverence? Because it challenges and questions. It forces the creator not to take themselves so seriously, to see their product from the consumer's point of view and to therefore engage with their aspirations. Irreverence constantly refreshes communication. And I think the Mentos Coke phenomena is a fantastic example of how the digital world can take the strategic position of refreshment and genuinely refresh it. I call that bottom-up creativity. Third lesson, it's increasingly a private conversation. Much of the new media occurs in a private place as opposed to a broadcast statement. But just because it's private doesn't mean you can say what you like. You can, of course, be more daring, more experimental, and of course, obviously, more interactive. But ultimately, what you're doing must feed back into the brand values. It's important to remember it's a private conversation that can quickly become public. I think, saving Chuck's blushes here, the brilliant work that they've done for Burger King utilizes the net in such a way. It loosens up the conversation between consumer and brand, and ultimately adds value to the brand as a whole. And you saw some of the work today for Subverting Chicken, which I think is a truly inventive take on a variety strategy. Nothing new there, you could argue, but expressed in such a fresh, funny way, it sticks. My fourth lesson is, I believe, beware of gags. Of course, it's great making people laugh. People love it. There's nothing new, of course, about the viral nature of jokes. In fact, jokes have always been viral, probably the most viral of all communication devices. However, just because someone passes it on doesn't necessarily mean it's of value. And I'm sure some in that room remember that cat having its head chopped off for a certain car company. Well, I'm sure a few more people nearly lost their heads over that one.